Good evening, folks. Thrash Pondo here, and I'm back with Season 5, Episode 8 of Fargo. And I cannot wait to get started. But before I do, I'm afraid there might just be a few spoilers, both speculative and authentic this time. So I'm going to ask you folks to, if you don't want me to go ahead and ruin the last couple of episodes for you, go ahead and tune out now. Okay, let's get started. This was a great episode, actually. One, it actually picks up right where the last episode leaves off. And they don't always do that. And I always find it very jarring, particularly when they leave off on something really, really, really important. And yes, Tillman grabs Dot and effectively just walks out of the hospital with her. Now, lo and behold, who shows up this time but one of our forgotten favorites, a state trooper, Whit Farr, who just happens to be dumping off drunk from a presumed drunk driving accident or brawl or something, and he sees Dot and he tries to come to her aid, but he is hopelessly outnumbered by Sheriff Tillman's lackeys, one of whom being, you guessed it, Gator, who I am, oh, oh, I am so sick of Gator. Oh, now I cannot help but feel a little sorry for him. But that doesn't mean it's not going to be really, really, really gratifying when something terrible happens to him. And that's not a spoiler. That's a pipe dream hope. But anyway, moving forward. So again, super far he tries to. Now the thing about Whit Far is a lot of people seem to think that he's a little on the wishy-washy side. He doesn't really have what it takes for a Fargo hero. He's by the book. That's his problem. He can't help Dot unless she asks for help. He can't go onto Tillman's ranch without a court order. He's doing what he can inside the scope of the Constitution, which is actually an amazing juxtaposition to Tillman, who is the sort of I am the law, Constitution be damned type. So now, unfortunately, they have an advantage in this type of situation. But don't sell Whit far off yet. I think he's a very strong character, and I think we see him shining through very, very soon. Unfortunately, in the interim, yeah, Tillman gets Dot back to the ranch, and things go about as poorly as one can imagine. I won't bore you with the ghastly details. I will tell you there's one particularly awful scene where Dot appears to be unconscious, as in he beat her into unconsciousness, and he, in this almost comical voice, he goes, "Oh, we're gonna play this game." And she's like, okay, fine, you're right, I'm awake. And it's the wow, she used to feign unconsciousness just to get him to stop hitting her. Ooh, I hate Tillman so much. You know what? I said something before. Remember, before I said how this series is the essence of class struggle, and then we talked more about gender inequality, and it's becoming a love letter to codependency. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that most of you people watching have some experience or at least a vague understanding about codependency, and that's what this season has become. We have seen so many people who've been abused that our natural inclination to sort of kick in is becoming almost instinctual. But, I could do a whole show about that when all is said and done. But anyway, I got to tell you. So anyway, moving forward, so Tillman goes to his debate for the sheriff for his reelection, and we know that Danish Graves has been up to something. Well, he does something which I find almost vaudevillian. He finds three goofs, legally changes their name to Roy Tillman, and somehow manages to use a loophole to get them on the stage. And they basically parrot everything Tillman says and humiliate them. Now, at first, I thought this wasn't going to work because it struck me Tillman is a more shrewd politician and would maybe pull something out of the Reagan or Kennedy playbook where he would joke along and come out smelling like a rose. But no, see, that's just it. Tillman is not a brilliant politician. He's a bully. And this small town, big fish in a small pond type. He rules by intimidation and being part of the old boy network. And when things don't go his way, he goes to pieces. He is a baby, like Lorraine said he was. He's just a very lethal, dangerous baby. And the scene seemed a little contrived to me. I wish they'd let it play it more organically, but it didn't really need to because the object was Tillman would be made a farce, and a farce he was made. And now here's the bad news. Remember when Dot said they only take it out on you when they feel weak? Speaking of the codependency kicking in, there's this almost 2 minute scene where Tillman gets out of his vehicle when they get home and he walks to where he's keeping Dot so he can take it out on her. And like with every footstep, I actually felt my respiration increasing. It's the old, oh, wait till your father gets home bit. And it's like you can feel Daddy getting angrier as he's getting closer to the home. And I'm not gonna like get involved into the writer's personal lives, but something tells me someone, I don't know if Noah himself or one of his writing staff, someone actually knew whereof they spoke there. And it was a particularly disturbing scene. Now, the good news is Dot is trying to fight back, both psychologically and physically. It's not doing any good, but she's trying, and she's specifically trying with Gator. That whole they have a whole interaction where at first she tries to get Gator's sympathy and says, "I can bring your mom back," and then when that's not working, she gets into his head and says, your father named you Gator because you weren't good enough to be a junior. And then he says something particularly hideous back to her. And it's so funny. You see the failed child in all its glory. He says, "I hope you die here, and I hope you never see your daughter again." And you know, Nadine goes, "You don't mean that." And he just looks at it and goes, "Yeah, I do." And he walks out, and we see it. Oh yes, he's turned. He wasn't an evil child, but he's become an evil young adult. And unfortunately, redemption is not on the table for him. But as he's walking away, you see him running it over and over again, like he's trying to dismiss what she said. Like deep down, he knows he's a failure, but he doesn't want to admit it. And of course, what does he do? He takes it on to somebody else. Rick Farr, who's been camped outside the ranch, gets a gun pulled on him by Gator, and Gator basically says, "Either leave or I'm going to kill you." Which works. Whitfar leaves, and remember how I said he's trying to do this by the book? This actually is the part that confused me the least. You'd think he'd gone right back to the precinct and said something like, rogue elements on the Tillman Ranch are shooting at state troopers. No, he just goes back to his patrol. But here's the part. You know how I'm always talking about how these episodes of Fargo, they're becoming almost operatic and they're building to some big crescendo? Almost by luck or synchronicity or serendipity or, well, whatnot. Who does Whitfar bump into but Danish Graves, who's doing his victory lap, having cost Tillman the election, and is going to head back to Minnesota. And Whitfar fills him in about where Dot's hiding, and Danish Graves, who's pretty much skated through the series so far, he's always one step ahead of somebody that's sort of the person always with the plan, always knows the score, always knows what the right move is, and he's going, And then Whitfire even says to him, he goes, "Whatever you're going to do, do quickly. That which you must do, do quickly." Because Clearly, Dot doesn't have much time left. And off he goes. Now, one thing before I do the wrap up between these two very important elements, I gotta say on the plus side, Indira, having worked another double. Oh, by the way, Whitfar has clued her in as to where Dot is. She goes home to change her uniform in between double shifts, and yep, we guessed it. Her useless man-child, worthless, no good, bordering on abusive, but doesn't even have the strength to pull that off. So basically, just parasites off her husband. Is in fact having an affair with, I'm gonna guess, was his physical therapist, but anyway, some other woman. And Indira is surprisingly not upset by this. She's like, "Fine, you wash his underwear from now on," and just says to him, "I want you out." And she then, of course, goes and tells Lorraine, who's only in about 45 seconds in this episode. Lorraine asks if she's taking the job. She gives this kind of convoluted answer about how I have to worry about myself for a while. And some people, I guess, you could interpret it like I'm taking care of myself by taking the job, or I'm going to take care of myself by having a little retreat and just sort of doing what I need to do before I make any career moves. But she goes, that's not why I'm here. Dot's at the Tillman Ranch, and they go into the office to make plans, and that's the last we see of them. Now, two really interesting things getting back to the whole Danish Graves and Gator Tillman angle. Danish Graves goes to the Tillman Ranch, and he has this very, very contemplative, stoic look on his face. And when he gets there, it's funny, he gets out of his car and he looks at his phone and doesn't answer it. And when he goes to see Tillman, he fesses up like, I'm the one who stole the election from you, but don't worry, I can turn this around. And it's odd because one, Tillman knew who was behind all those shenanigans. How could he not have? And two, Danish Graves, you don't fess up to a man like Tillman that you made him look like an idiot, but you can make it up to him. And I'm like, what's his end game? What's his end game? And here's where the spoilers really kick in. So I give you one last chance to tune out. Tillman kills him. And that is, as they say, that. Or is it? Now, Danish Graves is possibly the best example we have of a strong male in this show. Whitfar's pretty good. Jerome's an unknown to the equation. Something tells me he's pretty hardcore. Hopefully, he has a little more screen time in the last two episodes. A couple minor examples, but the one who's really holding the thing together is Danish. I think he knew what he was getting himself into. I think it was his Samson option. I think he's like, I'm going to go in there. I'll make it look like a negotiation with Tillman, and I know it's going to go south, but I'm going to plant the seeds of his doom. Now, what those are, I'm not entirely certain. It could just be something as simple as his car is going to be there and it's got GPS. His phone's still in his pocket. Lorraine can find him through that. It's going to bring the cavalry, as it were, to the Tillman Ranch. Or he did just overplay his hand because he had hubris and he thought he was smarter than Tillman. But no, watch. I think again. I don't think Danish was that rash. And